Maya had been working the night shift at the local Subway restaurant for over a year. It was usually quiet after 9 p.m., with only the occasional late-night customer. One night, as the clock struck midnight, Maya was wiping down the counter when the bell above the door chimed. A tall man in a dark coat and hat walked in. His face was partially obscured by the brim of his hat, casting a shadow over his features. "Welcome to Subway. What can I get for you?" Maya asked, trying to sound cheerful despite the unease she felt. The man didn't respond immediately. Instead, he stood there, motionless, staring at the menu board. After an unnerving silence, he finally spoke in a deep, gravelly voice. "I'll have the foot-long turkey on wheat." Maya prepared his sandwich, aware of his piercing gaze following her every move. When she handed it over, his fingers brushed against hers, sending a chill down her spine. The man smiled, revealing unnaturally sharp teeth. "Thank you," he said, his voice dripping with an unsettling satisfaction. He left without another word, but the sense of dread lingered. That night, Maya found herself unable to sleep, haunted by the memory of his smile. Little did she know, her nightmare was just beginning. Over the next few nights, she started noticing strange occurrences. Items moved, lights flickering, and a persistent feeling of being watched. One evening, she decided to check the security footage, hoping to find some logical explanation. What she saw made her blood run cold. The man in the dark coat appeared on the screen, but only when she wasn't looking directly at him. In the footage, he moved silently, almost gliding, and always stopped just short of where she was working. As she rewound the footage, she saw something even more disturbing. The man wasn't just watching her. He was mimicking her every move, as if studying her. With growing horror, she realized that his visits coincided with the nights when she had felt the most uneasy. Her heart pounded as she continued to watch, afraid of what she might see next. Then, the man on the screen turned to face the camera directly, his eyes glowing with a sinister light. He raised a hand and pointed, not at the camera, but at Maya herself, as if he could see her watching the footage. She stumbled back, knocking over a chair, her breath coming in ragged gasps. The screen went black, and the restaurant was plunged into an eerie silence. Maya's phone buzzed on the counter, a new message notification. With trembling hands, she unlocked it and read the message, "See you tonight." Maya's heart pounded as she reread the message. She tried to convince herself it was a prank, but the fear gnawing at her gut said otherwise. She grabbed her things and hurried out of the restaurant, her footsteps echoing in the empty parking lot. As she drove home, every shadow seemed to loom larger. Every noise seemed to whisper her name. The next day, Maya went to the police. They listened to her story with skepticism, but agreed to keep an eye on the restaurant. That night, she found herself dreading her shift, but she knew she had to go. The restaurant was her livelihood as she prepared for another lonely night. She couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. The police had stationed an officer nearby, but it did little to comfort her. Around midnight, the door chimed again. Her heart leaped into her throat as she looked up to see the same tall man in the dark coat. "Welcome to Subway," she stammered, her voice barely above a whisper. The man smiled, that same unsettling grin that haunted her dreams. "Foot-long turkey on wheat," he said, his voice as chilling as ever. Maya's hands shook as she made the sandwich. She could feel his eyes on her, and it took every ounce of her strength not to run. She handed him the sandwich, their fingers brushing once again. This time, his touch felt colder, almost icy. "Thank you," he said, his voice sending shivers down her spine. As he turned to leave, he paused and looked back at her. "You should go home early tonight." The words hung in the air long after he had gone. Maya hurried to the back room and checked the security footage, her heart pounding. The same disturbing scenes played out, but this time, the man seemed more present, more real. Suddenly, the lights flickered and the power went out, plunging the restaurant into darkness. Maya fumbled for her phone, using its flashlight to find her way. The silence was deafening, broken only by the sound of her own ragged breathing. Her phone buzzed with a new message. She glanced at it, her blood turning to ice. "I'm here." Maya spun around, her flashlight beam sweeping the room. In the corner, she saw the man, his eyes glowing in the dark. He stepped forward, his movements fluid and unnatural. "You need to leave," he said, his voice echoing through the room. Panic set in. Maya bolted for the back door, but it wouldn't budge. She turned back, her heart racing, to find the man standing closer, his smile widening. "Why are you doing this?" she cried, tears streaming down her face. The man's expression turned serious. "I warned you," he said softly. "You should have listened." Suddenly, the back door burst open and the police officer stationed outside rushed in, his flashlight cutting through the darkness. The man in the dark coat vanished, leaving only the echo of his chilling laughter. The officer escorted Maya outside, his grip firm but reassuring. "We need to get you somewhere safe," he said. Maya nodded, still shaken. As they walked to the police car, she glanced back at the restaurant. In the window, she saw a fleeting shadow, a reminder that the man in the dark coat wasn't done with her yet. Over the next few days, Maya stayed with friends, too terrified to return to work. The police kept watch, but the mysterious man didn't appear again. Despite their assurances, Maya knew the nightmare was far from over. The message on her phone replayed in her mind, "See you tonight." Her nights were filled with restless sleep and nightmares of glowing eyes and sinister smiles. One evening, as she sat in her friend's living room, her phone buzzed again. Hesitant, she looked at the screen. It was another message, "I'm waiting." The terror that gripped her heart was almost paralyzing. She showed the message to her friends, who urged her to change her number. But deep down, Maya knew it wouldn't matter. He had found her once. He could find her again that as the sun set and darkness enveloped the city. Maya couldn't shake the feeling that her ordeal was just beginning. She had faced the unknown visitor twice, and each time, the encounter left her more terrified. The only question that remained was what he wanted, and how far he would go to get it. One night, unable to bear the fear any longer, Maya decided to confront the entity. She returned to the subway restaurant, determined to face whatever awaited her. The bell above the door chimed as she stepped inside. The air was thick with tension, and every shadow seemed to move. Maya turned on the lights and walked to the counter, her resolve hardening. "I'm here," she said aloud, her voice echoing through the empty restaurant. "Show yourself." For a moment, there was only silence. Then the lights flickered and went out. Maya's phone buzzed with another message. "Behind you." She spun around, her flashlight cutting through the darkness. The man stood there, his eyes glowing with an eerie light. "Why are you doing this?" she demanded, her voice steady despite the fear coursing through her veins. He stepped closer, his smile fading. "You took something from me," he said, his voice filled with a sadness that caught Maya off guard. "And now, I'm here to take it back." "What did I take?" she asked, trying to understand that he reached into his coat and pulled out a locket, tarnished and old. "This belonged to my daughter," he said softly. "She died in this very spot, and you took her place." Maya's heart ached with a sudden realization. She remembered hearing about a tragic incident years ago, a young girl who had choked on her food and died. The restaurant had closed for a time, and when it reopened, Maya had started working there. "I didn't mean to," she whispered, tears welling in her eyes. "I didn't know." The man's expression softened, the anger in his eyes replaced by a deep sorrow. "I've been trying to find peace," he said, "but I can't, not while her spirit is trapped here." Maya felt a pang of sympathy for the grieving father. "How can I help?" she asked as he handed her the locket. "Find her resting place and return this," he said. "Only then can we both find peace." Maya took the locket, its cold metal warming in her hand. She nodded, determined to end the haunting. "I will," she promised. The man smiled, a genuine smile this time, before fading into the darkness. The lights flickered back on, and the oppressive feeling lifted. Maya knew what she had to do. The next day, she visited the local cemetery and found the girl's grave. Kneeling before it, she placed the locket on the headstone and whispered a prayer for the girl and her father as she stood. A sense of calm washed over her. The nightmares ceased, and the feeling of being watched disappeared. The man in the dark coat never returned, and Maya felt a newfound peace. But every now and then, when she worked the night shift, she would glance at the door, half expecting the bell to chime and the man to walk in. Though the fear had subsided, the memory remained. A reminder of the night she faced the unknown and found a way to bring peace to a restless soul. Months passed, and life at the Subway restaurant returned to normal. Maya resumed her night shifts, feeling a weight lifted from her shoulders. The eerie encounters seemed like a distant memory, almost like a bad dream. She often thought of the man and his daughter, hoping they had found the peace they deserved. One quiet evening, Maya was cleaning up when the doorbell chimed softly. She looked up, half expecting to see a regular customer. Instead, a young girl, no older than 10, stood there. She had a sweet smile and an old-fashioned dress that seemed out of place. Her eyes sparkled with an innocence that made Maya's heart ache. "Hello there," Maya greeted, her voice gentle. "What can I get for you?" The girl walked up to the counter, her steps light and almost ethereal. "I don't want a sandwich," she said softly. "I wanted to thank you." Maya felt a chill run down her spine. "Thank me? For what?" The girl's smile widened, and she placed a small, familiar locket on the counter. "For helping my daddy find peace. I was lost, but now I'm free." Maya's eyes filled with tears. She reached out to touch the locket, feeling its warmth. "You're the girl," she whispered. "Your father." The girl nodded. "He's happy now. We both are." As Maya looked into the girl's eyes, she felt an overwhelming sense of peace and closure. "I'm glad," she said, her voice choked with emotion. "I'm so glad." The girl took a step back, her form beginning to fade. "Goodbye, Maya. Thank you for everything." Before Maya could respond, the girl disappeared, leaving the locket behind. The restaurant felt different, warmer, brighter. Maya picked up the locket, feeling its significance. She knew she had done the right thing, not just for the man and his daughter, but for herself as well. From that night on, the Subway restaurant was free of any paranormal disturbances. The oppressive feeling, the flickering lights, the unsettling whispers, all gone. Maya continued to work her shifts, but with a renewed sense of purpose and peace. Every so often, she would glance at the locket she kept in her pocket, a reminder of the extraordinary encounter that changed her life. She knew she would never forget the man in the dark coat and his daughter, whose spirits were finally at rest, and in the quiet moments, when the night was still and the restaurant was empty, Maya felt a gentle, reassuring presence, watching over her, grateful for the kindness she had shown. Jared had always been skeptical of ghost stories, especially those that involved haunted objects. So, when he heard about the haunted sandwich at his Subway store, he laughed it off as a joke. According to the legend, a customer had choked to death on a sandwich years ago, and ever since, that particular order had brought misfortune to anyone who made it. One slow afternoon, Jared found himself bored and decided to test the legend. He made the exact sandwich from the story, a foot-long meatball marinara with extra jalapenos. As he placed it on the counter, a cold breeze swept through the restaurant, making him shiver. "Coincidence," he muttered to himself, wrapping the sandwich and putting it in the fridge. But as the day went on, strange things started happening. The lights flickered, utensils fell off the counter without reason, and the radio turned on by itself, playing a haunting melody that Jared had never heard before. That night, after closing up, Jared found himself alone in the darkened restaurant. The only light came from the flickering neon sign outside. He was about to leave when he heard a faint whisper, like someone calling his name. He turned, but no one was there. He shrugged it off and headed to the back room to grab his jacket. As he passed the fridge, he heard the whisper again, louder this time. He stopped, heart pounding, and opened the fridge. The sandwich he had made earlier was gone. In its place was a note written in what looked like smeared ketchup. "You shouldn't have made it." Panic set in as Jared realized he wasn't alone. He spun around, searching the shadows for any sign of movement. The whispering grew louder, more insistent, filling the room with an eerie chant. You shouldn't have made it. You shouldn't have made it. Desperate to escape, Jared ran for the door, but it slammed shut in front of him, locking him inside. The whispers turned to laughter, echoing around him. In the dim light, he saw a shadowy figure standing by the counter, holding the haunted sandwich. Its eyes glowed with a malevolent light as it took a slow, deliberate bite. Jared screamed, the sound swallowed by the darkness. The last thing he saw was the figure's smile, wide and sinister, as it whispered, "Now you belong to me." Jared couldn't shake the fear that had taken root in his mind after that terrifying night. He took a few days off from work, hoping the distance would help him recover from the ordeal. However, the unsettling memories lingered, and the mysterious message haunted him. Despite his anxiety, he decided to return to work, determined to face his fears. When he returned to the Subway restaurant, he was met with sympathetic looks from his colleagues. The story of the haunted sandwich had spread, and everyone was talking about it. Jared tried to laugh it off, but deep down, he knew there was something truly sinister about that sandwich point one evening. As Jared was getting ready to close up, he found himself alone in the store again. The familiar silence of the empty restaurant did little to calm his nerves. He glanced at the fridge, where he had left the haunted sandwich. To his surprise, it was still there, untouched and seemingly harmless. Determined to put an end to the fear that had plagued him, Jared decided to confront the source of his terror. He took the sandwich out of the fridge and placed it on the counter. The air grew colder, and a sense of dread washed over him. But Jared was resolute. He had to face this once and for all. As he stood there, staring at the sandwich, the lights began to flicker. The familiar haunting melody played on the radio, sending chills down his spine. Jared took a deep breath and picked up the sandwich, feeling its cold weight in his hands. Suddenly, the front door creaked open, and a rush of cold air swept through the restaurant. Jared turned to see a figure standing in the doorway, cloaked in shadows. The figure stepped forward, and Jared recognized the man from the legend, the man whose spirit was said to haunt the sandwich. "You shouldn't have made it," the man's voice echoed, sending a shiver down Jared's spine. Jared stood his ground, holding the sandwich out towards the apparition. "What do you want?" he demanded, his voice trembling. The man's eyes glowed with a malevolent light. "You have to finish what you started," he said. "Release me." Jared's mind raced. He knew he had to do something to break the curse. Gathering his courage, he unwrapped the sandwich and took a deep breath. "How do I release you?" he asked, his voice steady. "Eat the sandwich," the man replied, his tone both commanding and desperate. "Only then will I be free." Jared hesitated, the thought of eating the haunted sandwich filling him with dread. But he knew he had no choice. With trembling hands, he took a bite. The taste was bitter, and a wave of nausea swept over him. But he forced himself to chew and swallow. As he took another bite, the air grew colder, and the lights flickered more violently. The man's ghostly form began to waver, his eyes fixed on Jared. "Keep going," the apparition urged. Jared forced himself to eat more of the sandwich, each bite feeling like a struggle against an unseen force. The haunting melody grew louder. The shadows in the room seemed to close in on him. But he didn't stop. Finally, as he swallowed the last bite, the room was plunged into darkness. The radio fell silent, and the cold air dissipated. Jared felt a strange sense of relief wash over him. When the lights came back on, the man was gone, and the oppressive feeling that had haunted the restaurant was lifted. Jared collapsed onto a chair, exhausted but relieved. He had faced the terror and survived. The curse was broken, and the haunted sandwich was no more. From that night on, the Subway restaurant was free of any paranormal disturbances. Jared continued to work there, but with a newfound confidence and a sense of peace. He knew he had done something extraordinary, something that had freed a tormented spirit. And every time he made a sandwich, he couldn't help but feel a quiet gratitude for the normalcy that had returned to his life. The legend of the haunted sandwich faded into the past, becoming just another ghost story. But Jared never forgot the lesson he had learned. Sometimes, the only way to conquer fear is to face it head-on, no matter how terrifying it may seem. Emily had always enjoyed her job at Subway, especially the evening shifts. She liked the calmness of the store and the routine of making sandwiches. One evening, as she was getting ready to close up, the phone rang. It was unusual for the phone to ring so late, but she answered it anyway. "Subway, how can I help you?" she said, her voice cheerful. There was silence on the other end, followed by a faint static. Emily frowned and was about to hang up when she heard a voice, low and distorted. "You have to help me?" it said, barely more than a whisper. "Excuse me? Who is this?" Emily asked, her heart beginning to race. The voice repeated, "You have to help me. I'm trapped." Emily's mind raced. Was this some kind of prank? But there was something about the voice, a desperation that chilled her to the bone. "Where are you?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. The line crackled with static, and then the voice said, "I'm here, in the store." Emily's blood ran cold. She looked around the empty restaurant, her eyes scanning every corner. "This isn't funny," she said, her voice trembling. "If this is a joke, it's not funny." The voice grew more urgent. "Please, you have to help me. It's coming for me." Suddenly, the lights flickered and went out, plunging the restaurant into darkness. Emily's heart pounded in her chest as she fumbled for her phone to use its flashlight. The beam of light cut through the darkness, revealing the empty booths and counters. The phone rang again, the shrill sound echoing through the silent store. With shaking hands, Emily answered it. "Who is this?" she demanded. The voice on the other end was different this time, deeper and more menacing. "You shouldn't have answered," it said. "Now it's coming for you too." The line went dead. Emily's breath came in shallow gasps as she tried to process what was happening. She had to get out of there, but as she moved towards the door, she heard a noise behind her, a low growl that sent shivers down her spine. She turned slowly, her flashlight illuminating the source of the sound. In the corner of the room stood a figure, its eyes glowing with a malevolent light. It moved towards her, its growl growing louder, filling the room with a sense of impending doom. Emily backed away, her mind racing for a way out. She reached for her phone, but it slipped from her grasp, clattering to the floor. The figure was almost upon her now, its presence overwhelming and suffocating. With a final, desperate scream, Emily bolted for the door, yanking it open and racing out into the night. She didn't stop running until she reached the safety of her car, her heart pounding in her chest. As she fumbled with the keys, she glanced back at the store, half expecting to see the figure following her. But the doorway was empty, the store eerily silent. She drove away, vowing never to return to that Subway again. But as she glanced at her phone, a new message flashed on the screen. "You can't escape. I'm always here." The chilling words haunted her every night, a constant reminder that the horror was far from over. And every time the phone rang, her heart skipped a beat, dreading the day when she would have to face the unknown caller once more. Emily's nights were plagued with anxiety after the terrifying encounter at the Subway restaurant. The voice on the phone, the eerie growl, and the chilling message haunted her every waking moment. She stayed with friends and even considered quitting her job, but something inside her refused to be driven away by fear. Determined to uncover the truth, Emily did some research on the restaurant's history. She discovered that years ago, the Subway had been built on the site of an old building that had burned down under mysterious circumstances. Rumors circulated about a man who had perished in the fire, his spirit allegedly lingering, seeking vengeance or peace. Emily decided she needed to return to the restaurant and confront whatever was haunting her. She armed herself with a flashlight, a phone with a fully charged battery, and a resolve to face her fears. On the night she chose to return, she informed a friend of her plans, ensuring someone knew where she was as she stepped into the Subway. The familiar chime of the doorbell sounded unnervingly loud in the silent restaurant. Emily turned on the lights and took a deep breath, determined to end the nightmare. She walked behind the counter and dialed the restaurant's phone number from her cell. The phone rang, echoing through the empty space, then clicked as it was picked up. Emily held her breath, waiting for the voice. "You shouldn't have answered," the deep, menacing voice said again, sending a chill down her spine. Emily steadied her shaking hands. "Who are you? What do you want?" she demanded, her voice trembling but resolute. There was a pause, then the voice responded, "I am trapped. You have to help me." "How can I help you?" Emily asked, desperate for answers. The voice grew softer, almost pleading. "Find the place where I died. Release me from this torment." Emily remembered the old building that had burned down. She knew where it had stood, right beneath the Subway restaurant. Determined to uncover the truth, she started searching the restaurant for any clues related to the past tragedy. She found an old, charred photograph hidden behind a loose brick in the back room. It showed a man standing in front of a building, smiling. On the back, someone had written, "To Emily, my beloved daughter. Love, Dad." Tears filled Emily's eyes as she realized the spirit might be connected to her. She remembered her father's stories about his childhood home, the place that had burned down. Could it be that her father's spirit was trying to reach out to her? As she held the photograph, the lights flickered and the temperature dropped. Emily felt a presence in the room. She turned to see a shadowy figure standing in the doorway. It was the man from the photograph. "Dad?" she whispered, her voice breaking. The figure nodded, his eyes filled with sadness. "I couldn't leave until I knew you were safe," he said, his voice echoing through the room. Emily felt a wave of sorrow and relief wash over her. "I'm here, Dad. You're not alone anymore." The figure moved closer, his form becoming more solid. "Thank you, Emily. I've watched over you all these years, but now it's time for me to rest." With those words, the figure began to fade, a peaceful expression on his face. The oppressive feeling that had haunted the restaurant lifted, replaced by a sense of calm and closure. Emily placed the photograph in a frame and kept it on the counter as a reminder of the night she faced her fears and reunited with her father's spirit. The Subway restaurant returned to normal, free from any paranormal disturbances. Emily continued to work there, feeling a renewed sense of purpose and peace. She knew her father's spirit was finally at rest, and she had played a crucial role in freeing him from his torment. Every now and then, she would glance at the photograph and smile, knowing that she had helped her father find the peace he had sought for so long. The unknown caller was no more, and Emily had found a way to bridge the gap between the living and the dead, bringing closure to a haunting chapter in her life.